I want to genuinely ask, what is energy really? Where does it live? What is it made of? Can you point to it? Because here's the thing, when you actually push on the mainstream physics answer to that question, it gets pretty strange pretty fast. And as you might have learned already, I have very different view than mainstream, and I want to share it on this video. The standard story. So in standard physics, energy is defined as the capacity to do work. That's the textbook definition. It comes in many flavors: kinetic energy, potential energy, electromagnetic field energy, thermal energy, rest mass energy. And the most important rule is that the total amount never changes. Energy is conserved. It just transforms from one flavor to another. That sounds clean and sensible, but let's stress test it a little. Example 1, the lifted object. Take a 100-kilogram object, lift it 1 meter off the ground. Standard physics says you've added gravitational potential energy to that system. The energy is now stored in the object, or more precisely, in the gravitational field between the object and the Earth. Okay, I can sort of accept that. The object is higher up, gravity will pull it back down, it will accelerate and gain kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy can do work. The story makes sense in the forward direction. But now try this: you don't lift the object, instead you dig a hole. You take a shovel, dig 1 meter straight down under the object, and now the object is 1 meter above the bottom of the hole. Same relative height difference. Same gravitational potential energy stored, according to the math. But here's my question: what changed in the object? Nothing. You didn't touch it, you didn't move it. You just removed some dirt from below it, and somehow the object now has more stored energy than it did before. The formula says yes, the physics works out. But something about this feels deeply unsatisfying, because the energy doesn't seem to be in the object or in the hole or really anywhere concrete. It's a relational quantity. It exists in the relationship between the object and the Earth. And physics just says, yes, that's fine, that's how potential energy works. It's a number that depends on the configuration of the system. Don't look for it in any specific place. Okay, interesting, let's push further. Example 2, where does kinetic energy live? You throw a ball, it's moving. Standard physics says it has kinetic energy. EK equals 1/2 mv squared. Simple enough, but kinetic energy depends on your reference frame. If you're running alongside the ball at the same speed, the ball is stationary relative to you. Its kinetic energy in your reference frame is 0. So does the ball have kinetic energy or not? The answer is, it depends on who's asking. There is no absolute answer. Energy is not a property of the ball alone. It's a property of the ball and the observer. It's relational again. Example 3, the vacuum has energy. Here's where it really gets strange. Quantum field theory, our best description of particles and forces, says the vacuum itself has energy. Empty space isn't empty. It's a seething ocean of quantum fluctuations, with a baseline energy density called the vacuum energy, or zero-point energy. The theoretical prediction for how large this vacuum energy should be is something like 10 to the power of 120 times larger than what we actually measure. That's not a small discrepancy. That is the largest error in the history of theoretical physics. Physicists call it the cosmological constant problem, and it remains completely unsolved. So standard physics tells you that energy is fundamental. It's conserved, it's the backbone of everything. And then it can't account for the energy of empty space by a factor of 10 to the power of 120. By the way, 10 to the power of 120 is a 1 followed by 120 zeros, so large that if every atom in the observable universe were a grain of sand, you'd still be far short of that number. To mainstream, this is not clear indication that maybe our theories are not correct. It is just cosmological constant problem. Energy in mainstream physics is treated as a very reliable number, not as a concrete substance you can point to. It's not really in the object we're talking about, and when you look for it in the surrounding field or background, it doesn't live there in any straightforward way either. The bookkeeping works beautifully, but it leaves you with the uncomfortable feeling that nobody can say where the energy actually resides. The conservation law itself is incredibly powerful and useful. It never fails in experiments, but if you ask what energy is made of, where it sits, what its actual substance is, mainstream physics usually answers that this is not a meaningful question to ask. And I think that's unsatisfying, not wrong necessarily, but it leaves something important unanswered. TTFT and the geometric definition of energy. Starting from scratch, TTFT starts from a completely different place. Instead of saying, here's a list of types of energy and here are the conservation laws, TTFT asks, what is the most minimal possible description of physical reality, and what does energy look like in that description? The answer TTFT gives is this: the universe is a compact toroidal medium, a three-dimensional torus, and everything physical is a pattern of torsion flow in that medium. Torsion in this context means twisting or shearing of the fundamental geometric fabric, not of space exactly, but of the underlying field from which space itself emerges. Energy as a spectral label. When you have a medium that can support flows, you can ask, what are the stable, self-sustaining patterns that this medium can carry? On the three torus, those patterns are the eigenmodes of the torsion operator, like the harmonics on a guitar string, but in 3 dimensions on a compact toroidal geometry. Each eigenmode has an eigenvalue, a number that characterizes how sharply, how tightly, how rapidly that mode oscillates. And in TTFT, energy is that eigenvalue, or more precisely, energy is the spectral weight attached to a torsion eigenmode. But that still sounds abstract, so let me give you the picture I actually have in my head. Think of the ether like a river. In its natural state, the river flows smoothly and evenly without sharp bends or turbulence. That smooth, balanced flow is the baseline behavior of reality, the way the ether wants to move when nothing particular is happening. Now put a rock in the river. The water does not stop, it flows around the rock. It gets squeezed on the sides, it speeds up in some places, it curls into little whirlpools behind it. The rock has forced the water into specific paths it would never take on its own. That distorted pattern of flow around the rock is exactly what an eigenmode is in TTFT, a stable, self-consistent way the medium can twist and circulate when something disturbs it. The eigenvalue is how intense that distortion is, how fast the water is spinning in the whirlpools, how sharply it bends around the rock. Low eigenvalue, gentle detour. High eigenvalue, violent, tight, fast vortices. And the river wants to go back, that wanting, that constant, tireless pressure of the disturbed water trying to return to its natural flow, that is what we call energy. The rock isn't storing energy inside itself. The energy is in the disturbance, in the gap between how the water is flowing right now and how it wants to flow. Remove the rock and the river smooths out. The energy doesn't disappear, it was the equalization itself. The flowing back is the energy being released. The ether is a self-flowing, self-balancing medium in perpetual equilibrium circulation. Every physical object, field, and force is a local deformation of that circulation, a place where the flow has been channeled, compressed, twisted, or dammed by geometry. What we call energy is simply the magnitude of that deformation, how far the local flow has been displaced from its natural symmetric state. What we call dynamics, motion, radiation, attraction, heat, is the medium continuously trying to re-equalize, redistributing its flow back toward symmetry. Nothing is ever stored, nothing is ever lost. The ether is always flowing, always equalizing, and what we experience as the physical world is the shape of that equalization in progress. This is not just a poetic picture for rivers. The same story applies to every situation where we talk about forces or energies. Whenever you feel a push, see something accelerate, or watch something heat up, you are watching the ether flow being forced out of its preferred path and then trying to equalize again. A car rolling down the road is not carrying some invisible substance inside it. Its kinetic energy is the fact that the ether flow around the car is strongly directed in one way instead of being locally symmetric. Hit the brakes, and that directed flow is scattered into tiny, disordered motions in the brake pads and the air, what we call heat. The equalization shows up as the car slowing and the surroundings warming. Lift a weight onto a shelf. You haven't poured energy into the weight, you've rearranged the torsion flow between the weight and the earth. The ether now has to bend a little more to connect them. When you let the weight fall, that bent flow straightens out, pulling the weight down as it equalizes. We call that release of deformation, gravitational potential turning into kinetic, but it is one flow relaxing. Stretch a spring. In mainstream language, you store elastic potential energy in the spring. In TTFT language, you've twisted the local ether flow inside the metal coils away from its relaxed pattern. Let go and the spring snaps back as the internal flow unwinds toward symmetry, pushing on anything attached. The force of the spring is the medium insisting on its original path. Charge a capacitor or drive current through a coil. The ether around the plates or the coil is now forced into a specific rotational pattern, an electric or magnetic field. That field is a real deformation of the flow. When you discharge the capacitor or collapse the current, the field pattern disappears as the flow re-equalizes, and that equalization is what drives current in the circuit or produces a voltage spike. In every case, from mechanics to electromagnetism, what we call energy is the size of the detour we have forced on the ether, and what we call force is how hard the medium pushes back on anything that is trying to hold that detour in place. Now there's one more piece that matters for how I see energy. In this universe, nothing is ever truly still. Even if you, as an observer, somehow match the motion of the local ether perfectly, no relative wind, no local field changes, the larger picture would still be moving. The Earth is spinning, the Earth is orbiting the Sun is orbiting the center of the galaxy. The galaxy itself is drifting and rotating among other galaxies. There is no global pause button anywhere. That means the ether is never in a perfectly flat, frozen state. The calm river is always flowing. There are always rocks, always ripples, always some deformation somewhere. Equalization is never finished. It is a continuous process. And earlier in this series I said something that, for me, is crucial. The ether and consciousness are the same thing seen from two sides. From the outside, we call it a torsion field, a flowing geometric medium that fills all of space. From the inside, we call it awareness, the fact that there is experience at all, that anything is like something from the first-person point of view. You can test this in your own mind. Try right now to be completely still inside. No thoughts, no images, no emotions, no memories, no expectations, no sense of me or time passing. If you really succeeded, there would be nothing there to notice it. The instant you become aware that I am in a thoughtless state, a tiny ripple has already appeared, a meta-thought, a faint self-reflection. Just like the ether, your inner life never truly hits zero. There is always some motion, some tiny vibration of attention, some background hum of being. So the way I see it, energy is not just out there in matter and fields. It is the outer face of the same thing you feel as inner movement, as curiosity, as emotion, as the flow of experience. Outside, ether flow being forced into specific patterns, always trying to re-equalize. Inside, consciousness moving through thoughts, sensations, and states, always trying to make sense of itself. In TTFT, those are not two separate worlds. They are one process seen from different angles. And the name we give to that single, restless process of rebalancing, inside and outside, is what we call energy.